If you're thinking about moving to southern Utah but still have lots of unanswered questions, this video is for you because we're going to go through top 10 most commonly asked questions that we receive on almost daily basis right after this intro. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Here we talk about living, playing, and working in southern Utah, as well as all things real estate. So if you haven't done so already, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell right next to it. Today's video is in a new format for this channel. We're going to go through a bit of a Q&A about the top 10 questions that we get asked a lot. As this channel has been growing, a lot more and more people are reaching out to us and using us as a resource when considering moving to southern Utah based on some of the information that we provide. So we decided to create this video and perhaps a new series of these videos. Depending on how you guys feel about it, drop us a comment below this video and let us know if you like this format, if it does it for you or not. We'd be curious to know, since this is the first one in the series. But yeah, let us know how you guys feel about this format. So Michonne and I are going to go through the top 10 questions that we get asked on almost daily basis.
Daily basis, yeah.
And, in fact, if you're thinking about moving to southern Utah yourself, our contact information is in the description below this video, because chances are we're not going to answer all the questions. But yeah, without further ado, let's go through our top 10.
Okay, and if you guys think of any questions that you have unanswered, please drop it in the comments below. So our first question that we get asked on a daily basis are there jobs in southern Utah?
That's, in fact, a question that we get asked a lot, as this part of the U.S. is becoming more and more attractive, and there isn't any manufacturing or any huge companies that are based out of southern Utah. I would say if you're thinking about moving here and you're looking for employment, I would base your searches around health, wellness, and wealth. So the top three industries that do really well around southern Utah are healthcare facilities. There are several large hospitals and cancer centers. So if you happen to be a nurse or a doctor,
any medical
field, there are constantly plenty of openings. Wellness industry, anything with sports and nutrition and physical fitness training. There's plenty of employment opportunities there. And wealth, there are plenty of options to get into good gainful employment in mortgage, personal finance industry, accounting, CPAs, that sort of thing. On top of that, any jobs that are surrounding real estate and building. So if you're more of a person that works with your hands, construction industry is booming in this area, as it's been growing like crazy over the last few years. So naturally, anything that has anything to do with real estate or building would do really well. And lastly, if you're just confused and you don't know what to do, where to start, one of the websites that I like to use to look at employment opportunities in different areas, and there are plenty of those websites, but Indeed.com, I'll drop a link in the description below this video. So if we go to Indeed.com and look at St. George, Utah, there are currently over 1,087 jobs that are posted, and they start anywhere from entry level, $10 to $15 an hour, and go all the way up to six figures, depending on the industry and the vertical that you may find yourself in.
Awesome. Okay, so our next question that we get asked quite often is Utah Second Amendment friendly?
Yes, we get that question a lot. So yes, Utah is very Second Amendment friendly. In fact, just doing a quick Google search, according to Wikipedia, I'm not sure why Wikipedia keeps such recently updated articles, but a 2013 study ranked Utah the lowest among all 50 states in the category of gun control legislation. So Utah is incredibly gun friendly. There are very little restrictions on the type of firearm that you can possess, carry, or own. There are no magazine restrictions. There are no restrictive laws against any specific type of firearms. Concealed carry is obtainable, and the reciprocity of a concealed carry permit from Utah is accepted in most states, with the exception if you happen to have a concealed carry permit from Utah, it does not reciprocate with California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, and South Carolina. So pretty much the rest of the states, if you get a concealed carry permit from Utah, you'd be good to go, and it would reciprocate with pretty much all the rest of the states that I did not mention.
Okay. So another question that we get asked all the time is, are Mormons cliquey? What if I am of different religion or not religious at all? What if my kids do not go to church?
That one is a loaded question. Normally, whenever people reach out to us and ask that question, it takes a little bit of courage to work up. And I'm not sure why it is a strange, difficult question for a lot of people to ask. So we decided to just take a head-on approach to answer that question. So a lot of people would call me and ask and say, like, we're not religious, or we're Christian but not Mormon, and we've heard that nobody would play with our kids, or if we're not Mormon, we wouldn't succeed in business in Utah. And I think there's a lot of fake news these days and false information on the internet. So a lot of it stems down from the state of Utah in general being very conservative and preserving its traditional values, with evidently not a lot of up-to-date information that's out on the internet. But since I've moved to Utah, I've lived here for about 6 years, I am actually not religious myself, and I don't feel that at any point throughout my real estate career and through just living in Utah, I have been treated any differently. We have a lot of clients and friends in this area that are various forms of spiritual beliefs and religion, and
a lot of diversity.
There are a lot more churches than just LDS churches if you are religious, and kids don't have any boundaries in terms of, parents don't just allow or disallow for them to mingle within their own circles. So that myth is busted.
All right, so another question we get asked all the time, does it get really hot in St. George?
It does get really hot. What would you say is the hottest month?
I would say July and August gets a little too warm. I mean, you can still, we have bulldogs, so they can't be out in the heat. So if we go for our walks early mornings, late evenings, they're still fine. So unless you're out in the middle of the day, you probably just want to hang out at the lake, be around the water.
Yeah, and something that's a big change for me, having lived in other hot climates before, like the southeast of this country, for instance, or even California. I've compared this with a couple of our clients that moved here from California. See, Utah is a high desert, so our elevation is at about 2,500 feet above sea level. And being a high desert and pretty far away from any large bodies of water, our humidity here is usually really, really low. So if you compare 80 degrees in Atlanta, Georgia to 80 degrees in southern Utah, on an 80-degree day, if you're standing in a shade, it actually feels almost chilly, versus 80 degrees and high humidity, you cannot escape from it. You feel like you're just drenched in sweat, and things just get hot and sticky.
It's a drier heat, so if it is like 100, it's tolerable. It's hard to explain it. There's no humidity, so it sounds like, if you hear 100, that sounds bad, but without the humidity, it's tolerable. Yeah. It's not bad.
If it's 110, that's where I draw the line.
Okay, yeah. Heat stroke.
And historically, whenever these high temperatures hit, as a realtor, I don't have a whole lot of things I could complain about, but that's one of them. Typically, July and August is when Murphy's Law, but July and August is when we show the most land. For some reason, during those months, we go out and we look at lots. You do feel like your feet are sizzling and you're starting to cook a little bit if you stand out in a direct sun. But on the flip side, based on our location, if you travel just 40 miles north or pretty much anywhere around us, because we're kind of sit in a valley, the elevation will change. And like, for instance, Cedar City is at about 6,500 feet above sea level. So you could naturally expect for the temperatures to drop by at least 20 degrees. So you have that available to you as well if you're trying to seek any form of outdoor entertainment during the summertime. Just going a little bit north could make the middle of the day usable for outdoor activities.
Okay. And let's see, how is the crime rate?
That's another great question. Often, that's also another one of those strangely roundabout questions. Sometimes people call me and they're like, "Hey, what's a good part of town?
Yeah.
Like, where can I be safe?" And the short answer is pretty much anywhere in Washington County. And I've lived in Chicago before, so I know, like, if you were to ask me about what is a safe part of Chicago, actually, strangely, I could map it out. And this is the tool that I normally used before. I've moved across country several times, and when you move into the new area, you could usually go on Trulia, not Zillow, Trulia, and you could type in an address, and then they typically have a relatively accurate neighborhood crime rate map. For instance, in the city of Chicago, if you go too far south or too far west, the map becomes red because it records the number of violent and nonviolent crime that happens in the neighborhood, and it just puts a red dot on the map. All of St. George would appear to be green because there's very minimal amount of crime rate that actually happens. And by the most part, in most neighborhoods, you could leave your car in a driveway with the key in the ignition, and it would still be there if you left it overnight.
Yep.
And also, if you guys are interested in a more in-depth crime rate analysis, we'll put a link up here. One of the previous videos that we shot about St. George includes some of the stats and graphs on exactly what the numbers on crime rate in this area look like.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Another question that we get asked often is, how are the schools? Are the schools good? Are they safe?
Yeah, average school rating in southern Utah and Washington County is right around 7, I believe. And strangely, some of the points that are lost in some of the schools are for the diversity. I guess there's a specific metric for an overall mixture of students based on race and origin. And a lot of the schools in southern Utah are predominantly Caucasian. And because children don't get to experience the cultural mix, schools lose a little bit of their rating. That's why a lot of the schools in Washington County have a rating of 7. But there are a lot of great schools with great foreign language programs. I think Chinese is a...
There's Mandarin and there's
Mandarin and
Spanish. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a very prominent program in this area. And I've heard from some of my friends in the past that they were thinking about moving cross country, but it's not offered in a lot of other school districts.
We also get asked all the time, what are the property taxes like?
Property taxes in Washington County are amongst the lowest in the nation. So the general tax assessment rate is at 0.088%. So it's less than 1%. And that's if it's your second property or your investment property. So if it's your primary residence, you would get a slip from the county assessor's office that would verify your driver's license address has to match with your property address. So if you're purchasing a primary residence here in Washington County, you would qualify for an additional 45% exemption. So your property taxes would amount to 0.065%. Like, it would be just very, very minimal. And Utah is a non-disclosed state, so typically our best advice to our clients is to allow the county assessor evaluate your property, because in our experience, don't quote me on this, but from what we're typically seeing is that county assessor tends to not be up to speed with the market values of the property. So my best advice is to usually allow for the county assessor to evaluate what your home is worth. And if for whatever reason that evaluation comes in higher than the purchase price, at that point you could bring in your real estate purchase contract and lower your property taxes. But usually if you allow for the county assessor to figure out what your property is worth, you would end up on the better side of that equation.
Okay. How about, is there nightlife in St. George?
Nightlife in St. George is it's very minimal. So partly that's associated with the state liquor laws. As most establishments in southern Utah, it is really, really difficult to get a liquor license for an establishment. So there are 2 bars in St. George that can be considered bars. They're beer bars. So there's a brewery downtown. That's one of them. That's a relatively new establishment that has a local microbrewery and several floors. They're set up kind of as a lounge. Has a really good atmosphere. But getting back to the liquor laws, if, let's say, for instance, you walked into a restaurant, so the next most commonly asked question is like, well, I can't even have a beverage, an adult beverage with my dinner. No, there's no restrictions on that. But kind of a quirky thing about local liquor laws is if you went to, let's say, Applebee's or Chili's and you wanted to order just the beverage without food, that establishment would not be allowed to legally sell that to you without at least an appetizer. That's one of the requirements with the local liquor laws. However, if you're looking for proper nightlife entertainment, Mesquite, Nevada has several casinos that constantly have live music, comedians, stand-up shows, all sorts of entertainment that brings in people from all over Utah and Nevada.
It's about a 30-minute drive.
Yeah, it's just a 30-minute drive, and you're kind of back to normal liquor laws without any restrictions. And if you want very proper entertainment, then Las Vegas is
an hour more, so
yeah,
hour and a half away total.
Yeah, so it's kind of nice, and I'm no stranger to that industry. When I lived in Chicago, I bartended, and I worked in that atmosphere throughout my college years. From a perspective of homeowner, I'm perfectly fine with having to drive for 2 hours to the places where people enjoy that form of entertainment, just to know that there's a lesser chance of having to deal with the aftermath in my neighborhood.
Okay. How much money do I need to make to live in St. George comfortably?
That's another very interesting question, and I might get some hate in the comments for answering that question, but we kind of evaluated this. I will put a link up here to one of the other videos that talks about cost of living in St. George. And in that video, we don't specifically directly answer the question of how much money do you need to live comfortably in southern Utah. There is a common misconception that southern Utah is one of the most affordable places in the United States. I wouldn't say that it's the most affordable. But here's where that comparison comes in. If you compare some of the most desirable places to live in southern Utah, they're often large cities in big metro areas like LA, New York, Chicago. Let me track back on desirable. With the recent events, I don't know, but there's still a desirability factor. But when comparing expensive living in southern Utah to, say, Chicago or LA, it's considerably cheaper. If you're comparing expensive living in southern Utah to a small community somewhere on the East Coast, hands down, is going to be way more expensive. But to answer the question numerically, like what would it take if you had to rent or own a house and be able to afford food and entertainment, I would say that a healthy figure of around $100,000 a year per family of 2.5 would allow for you to live here comfortably.
Because let's talk about average rent. We'll have a lot of people reach out asking us what rent is going for.
Yeah.
low-income homes are hard to come by, but those are around 1,000 to 1,100.
And they're pretty non-existent. So the rent figure of $800 to $1,000 is more of an exception to the rule. Like, I wouldn't even hope for that to be readily available. Like, yes, those listings do come up occasionally, but I would say the lower end of rental housing, which would be your standard 3-bedroom, 2-bath, maybe a garage, maybe a townhome, but you're probably looking at about $1,300.
Yeah.
So rents would start from $1,300 for a condo or a small house to, if you're looking at a 4-bedroom home that's a detached home, not a condo, you're probably closer to the $2,000 price range. Cost of utilities is really low compared to the national standards. Actually, even compared to like smaller, cheaper, more affordable communities on the East Coast. So you're not going to spend a ton on utilities, but food, entertainment, fuel, all the other expenses that compile, I would say if you're close to $100,000 a year, you're going to be comfortable.
Okay. Okay, and another question we get asked all the time is, can I get a home on a 1-acre plus lot with a pool and a 3-car garage?
Yes, absolutely. What is your budget?
Exactly.
So as this area started to boom, and I believe St. George has been in the top 7 of the fastest growing metro areas for something ridiculous, like the last 10 years or so. So naturally, as this area began to grow, there was more land than we knew what to do with. And now, as we expand into the desert and there are new developments that are coming up, it seems like weekly, we don't make land anymore. So ultimately, the lots are becoming smaller, and the dream of having a 1-acre lot in St. George proper or Washington is pretty much non-existent. There are some properties that sit on those larger lots, but typically if you want an acre lot in St. George, the price range would be closer to $1 million because it's typically a higher end home that also has a large property. If you're open to being outside of the area, like say maybe a 30 or 40-minute drive to St. George, you may be able to get into something in the $500,000 to $600,000 range that would sit on a larger lot. But a typical, so median sale price in Washington County right now is at $397,000. So if we talk about the median sale price home, you know, like your standard 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath, 2 or 3-car garage, in that price range, most of the lots are going to be 0.25 to a 0.3 acre lot. So you're not right on top of your neighbors, but you're relatively close. For somebody that's looking for a property on a large lot or something that has a feeling or an illusion of a property that has the endless backyard and doesn't back up to the neighbors, there are a lot of properties that back up to the BLM land, Bureau of Land Management. So often there are parcels that are not usable or buildable, like Turtle Preserve or the property that's owned by the government that's not sold to private parties. So that may be a good solution if you're not necessarily looking to spend $1 million. If you have, $400,000 to $500,000 to spend on a home, you may be able to find something that sits on a parcel that just backs up to land that's not buildable, so you don't have to maintain the entire parcel, and you still have some of that availability of, the feeling of endless backyard.
So I just was curious myself to run a quick search. So I just ran a search for on at least a 1-acre with a pool and a 3-car garage. I didn't put any price or anything else. Let's see, the cheapest home with that criteria is $995,000. So
yeah, so like I was saying, if you want an acre, it's totally doable. The prices would typically start in that $1 million ballpark. but it is a nice property and you get quite a bit for your money. So if you're comparing apples to apples, you know, $1 million properties, what does $1 million get you in St. George, Utah versus $1 million in LA County? You would get a lot more value for your money.
But that does include 3-car garage with a pool. So if you're curious, reach out to us. We'd love to help you run a search, find exactly what you're looking for, give you an idea of what's on the market. We'd love to help you.
Yeah, if you're even remotely considering moving to Southern Utah, Michonne and I are both realtors and we would absolutely love to be of service to you. We'll provide our contact information in the description below this video, so you can feel free to text us, call us, email us, contact us on MySpace.
MySpace, yeah.
MySpace, for sure. Or even send smoke signals or pigeons. And if you found this video useful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up so that YouTube can recommend this video to more people so that more people can become more knowledgeable about Southern Utah. And we will see you in the next one. Peace.